July the 17th, 1942. Dust hangs in the air above the rolling steppe west of Stalingrad, clinging to the heat like smoke that refuses to disperse. The land is a wide, rippling sea of yellowed grass and scorched earth, broken only by low rises, dry ravines, and the dark, crooked lines of distant villages along the horizon. A column of German vehicles moves slowly along a rutted track, engines growling in uneven chorus. At the front roll a pair of Panzer III tanks, their turrets swaying slightly as they bounce over the hardened ground. Behind them rattle half-tracks packed with grenadiers from the 6th Army, sweat darkening the collars of field-grey tunics, faces smeared with steppe dust and engine grime. In one of the lead half-tracks, Oberleutnant Karl Fischer lifts his goggles and squints into the glare ahead. The sun is high and relentless. His map, folded and refolded so often that the creases are turning white, flaps in the wind at the edge of his gloved hand. Another 10 kilometers and we reach the next river line. The driver shouts over the engine noise. If the Russians have not blown all the bridges already. Fischer answers, eyes still scanning the open ground. Keep your spacing? We are too exposed out here. They have been told the same thing for days now. Stalingrad is ahead of them, somewhere beyond the shimmering horizon, a name repeated in orders and briefings, a key city, an industrial prize. Take it, and the Volga will be cut. The 6th Army is to strike like a hammer, and these advance elements are the tip. But the steppe does not look conquered. It feels watchful, far ahead, on a low ridge overlooking the same road. A handful of Soviet soldiers lie pressed against the warm earth, the grass whispering around them. Their uniforms are faded, their boots worn, but their eyes are alert. Junior Lieutenant Ivan Sokolov lifts a battered pair of field glasses and studies the approaching dust cloud. German armor, trucks, infantry. His heart beats faster, but his voice stays calm as he speaks to the men around him. That is not a patrol, he says. That is the beginning. Beside him, a machine gunner checks the feed of his Degtyaryov light machine gun, fingers nimble despite the heat. Another soldier whispers a quick curse about the odds they face. There are so few of them on this ridge. Just an outpost, really. One of many scattered forward by a command desperate to slow the German advance. Remember, comrades, Sokolov says quietly, we are not here to hold forever. We are here to make them pay for every kilometer. He glances back at the shallow trenches carved into the slope, at the camouflaged anti-tank gun dug in among dried weeds. The gun's barrel points downslope toward the road, its crew silent, waiting. Behind this line are more positions, more delaying detachments, and further back still, the beginnings of a larger defense taking shape around the city that everyone is talking about, but few have seen. On the road below, Fischer raises his hand, signaling the column to slow. Something feels wrong. The horizon is too still. The distant farmhouses too quiet. He slips his goggles back over his eyes and taps the shoulder of the radio operator. Tell the lead panzer to watch that ridge to the north and get the artillery battery on standby. I do not like this. The radio crackles. A short burst of coordinates is transmitted. Somewhere behind them, unseen guns adjust their barrels a fraction of a degree. You can almost feel the moment when the stillness tightens, when the steppe seems to hold its breath. Up on the ridge, Sokolov lowers his field glasses. Wait until they are in the killing zone, he murmurs. Then we open fire. We delay them. If we fall here, others will take our place. The German tanks trundle closer, their tracks grinding the earth, their silhouettes growing larger, clearer, more real. In a few more seconds, the range will be right. On both sides, fingers curl around triggers. Breaths are held, and orders hover on the edge of being spoken. The battle for Stalingrad has not yet been declared in speeches or on maps. But here, on this dusty road, with a single Soviet outpost staring down the spearhead of the Sixth Army. The campaign is about to begin, in the crack of rifles and the blunt thunder of guns. The first shot is a flat, brutal crack that slices through the heavy afternoon air. For a heartbeat, the men in the German column do not understand what has happened. Then, on the road ahead, the leading panzer thread jerks as if struck by an invisible hammer. A geyser of sparks and shattered metal bursts from the side of its turret. The tank slews off the track, one track locking, the other dragging, before it lurches to a stop in a cloud of dust and black smoke. "Anti-tank fire," someone shouts from a half-track. Oberleutnant Fischer feels the concussion of the hit in his chest, even from where he sits. He is already moving before the words register, dropping low in the half-track and bellowing orders. Off the road. Off the road. Take cover. Fan out to the flanks. Machine guns forward. Now. The driver jerks the wheel, the vehicle bouncing down from the raised track into the ditch. Mud and dust spraying. Grenadiers scramble over the side. Boots landing hard, bodies crouching low as they run toward what little cover the open steppe offers, shallow depressions, scrubby bushes. An old fence line. Another flash blooms from the ridge ahead. The second Soviet shell screams down, slamming into the ground just short of the road, tossing up a plume of earth and smoke that peppers the hull of the second tank. Shrapnel rattles like hail on steel. High on the ridge, the crew of the Soviet anti-tank gun works in a tight, practiced rhythm. The loader rams another round into the breach. The gunner adjusts elevation by instinct more than sight. Eyes locked to the optic. Jaw clenched, sweat trickles under their helmets. Hit the second tank. Do not let them push through. Junior Lieutenant Sokolov calls over the ringing in his ears. Make them stop. To the left of the gun, the Degtyaryov machine gun chatters to life, its stuttering bursts stitching across the German column. Bullets kick up spurts of dust around running figures. A grenadier falls, legs folding under him, rifle spinning from his hand. You can almost feel the panic tugging at the edges of discipline as the German advance guards are forced to ground. Men who, an instant ago, were riding confidently toward an unseen city now find themselves pressed into the dirt. Hearts pounding, breath coming in sharp, dusty gasps. Fischer crawls behind the shelter of a small rise and yanks the handset of the radio toward him. Artillery. This is Forward Unit Cronin. We are under fire from anti-tank guns on a ridge ahead. Grid reference. He glances up, judging distance, recalling the map in his head. Request immediate barrage. Smoke and high explosive. Marking target. He snaps his fingers at a nearby soldier. Signal flare. White. Now, a white streak arcs into the sky and hangs there for a second, like a frozen star before beginning to drift. Far behind, the guns that had been waiting answer with deep, distant booms. On the ridge, Sokolov hears that sound and knows what is coming. Prepare to move, he shouts to his men between bursts of fire. We cannot stay once their artillery finds us. We have done our job when they stop moving. The anti-tank gun fires again. This time the shell slams into the hull of the second panzer. Flames lick from an open hatch as the crew inside scramble to escape, one of them tumbling out, uniform smoking, rolling desperately on the ground. German machine guns reply, tracers reaching hungrily toward the ridge. Dirt spits in front of Soviet foxholes. Rocks splinter. A soldier cries out and pulls his hand to his chest, fingers coming away red. Short bursts. Change position, Sokolov orders, grabbing one man by the shoulder and dragging him a few meters along the trench. Do not let them pin you. Remember, we fall back in pairs when the shells start walking toward us. For a moment, the hillside is a chaotic exchange of fire. German rifles cracking from hastily found cover. Soviet guns hammering from their dug-in holes. The steppe trembles as German artillery shells begin to land. First wide, then closer, each impact throwing up towering columns of dirt and smoke that roll over the ridge like angry surf. The Soviet gun crew keeps firing as long as they can, each shot slower as the air fills with dust and choking fumes. When a shell lands close enough to flip the gun on its side, Sokolov does not hesitate. Back down the slope, he yells. Coughing, we have delayed them. Now we live to delay them again. They slip away behind the crest, bent low, some running, some half stumbling, leaving behind the wrecked gun and the bodies of comrades who will not move again. Below, the German column lies scattered and stalled, wounded men being dragged to cover, officers shouting, signals flying as they try to regain momentum. On this single stretch of road, a few Soviet defenders have bought precious minutes at the cost of lives and iron. The steppe is no longer quiet. The clash near Stalingrad has begun. The barrage tapers off, slowly, like a storm moving into the distance, each final shell echoing longer than the last. Where Sokolov's ridge position had once been a jagged crown of scrub and shallow trenches, it is now pitted and torn. Smoke hangs low, hugging the slope, carrying the metallic stench of burning steel and blood. Oberleutnant Fischer walks carefully among the craters, boots crunching on splintered wood and shattered rocks. Medics move past him with stretchers, faces set in tight, professional masks. Nearby, the burned-out Panzer lies at an angle in the ditch, turret half blown open. Black streaks up the armor like claw marks. They hit us hard for such a small unit, murmurs one of his platoon leaders, a Feldwebel with dust caked into every crease of his face. They hit us hard because they knew what they were doing. Fischer replies. His eyes are already on the next ridge, further east, on the faint lines of telegraph poles that run toward the distant, unseen city, and because they have no choice. Orders arrive over the radio. The advance is to continue. The enemy positions on the ridge are to be marked, logged when bypassed once cleared. The 6th Army cannot afford to lose time. Stalingrad awaits. The column reforms with a little more caution now. Tanks advance with greater spacing, infantry pushing out to the flanks. Reconnaissance patrols fan out ahead in pairs of armored cars, raising their own small trails of dust. Farther to the east, Sokolov's retreating detachment emerges onto another low rise, lungs burning, uniforms streaked with dirt and soot. A few of the men cough up dust and spit into the grass. One soldier, bandaged hastily around the arm, stubbornly refuses to sit. Before them, the land dips into a shallow valley where a narrow stream glints weakly in the sun. Beyond that lies a straggle of wooden houses and barns, a small village with a single church spire poking up from a cluster of trees. Waiting there are more Soviet troops. A captain in a frayed tunic, Captain Nechayev, steps forward to meet Sokolov as his men approach. Behind Nechayev, an anti-tank rifle team rests under the shade of a haystack, while a platoon of riflemen crouches among garden plots and fence lines. A single old field gun sits hidden behind a barn, its barrel poking through a rough hole in the wall. "You were the ridge outpost," Nechayev says. "It is not a question." "Yes, comrade captain." Sokolov's voice is hoarse. "We delayed them. 2 tanks at least. They will come on more carefully now." "Good. That is exactly what we need." Nechayev nods once, as if ticking off a box in a mental list. "Our orders are clear. Slow them. Force them to deploy. Make them think the city is already in front of them, even out here." He gestures toward the village. "These houses are worth a few more minutes. Maybe an hour, if we are lucky." Behind us they are digging in closer to the Volga. Factories, rail yards, the river crossings. They need time. We give it to them. Sokolov looks over the improvised defenses. Trenches cut through vegetable gardens. Firing positions knocked out of barn walls. Ammunition crates stacked behind wells and chicken coops. It is not a fortress. It is a tripwire, When the pressure is too much, he asks quietly. Nechayev gives a tired smile. Then we leave them ruins instead of shelter and fall back again. The Germans come just as the shadows of the village begin to stretch eastward. First, distant shapes on the horizon. Then, the dull glint of armor. Then, the low growl of engines and the faint flicker of movement as infantry dismounts and spreads out. In one of the forward half-tracks, Fischer studies the village through his field glasses. Another position, he mutters. They are not abandoning this ground. Every ridge, every house, they intend to make us pay. He lowers the glasses and raises his arm. Artillery markers ready, machine guns. Watch the windows and fences. If they want to fight for every kilometer, we will fight for every meter. Once again, the wide steppe gathers itself, the air thick with expectation. Once again, Soviet defenders wait in shallow trenches and broken buildings, ready to trade blood and time for distance. The clash near Stalingrad is no longer a single ambush on a lonely ridge. It is becoming a chain of battles, each link forged in fire and retreat, drawing the Sixth Army ever closer to the city whose name now weighs on every tongue. The first German shells fall short of the village, ploughing furrows into the fields and sending clods of earth raining over potato plants and trampled fences. Chickens scatter in a frenzy, wings beating against the air, before a second salvo crashes closer and turns one of the barns into a billowing tower of smoke and splinters. Captain Nechayev ducks behind a low brick wall, shards of plaster showering his helmet. Beside him, Junior Lieutenant Sokolov wipes dust from his eyes and peers through a jagged gap toward the advancing enemy. German infantry advances in well-spaced waves, hunched low, rifles at the ready. Behind them, tanks edge forward cautiously, pausing to fire short. Concussive blasts at suspected positions. Between houses, you can see figures dropping to a knee, machine guns setting up, officers pointing, correcting, guiding. They have learned from the ridge. Sokolov says, "Yes." Nechayev replies, "Good." Careful enemies move slower. He signals with a quick wave of his hand. A rifle platoon shifts along the trench that has been cut through a vegetable garden, boots trampling rows of cabbages. The men move quietly now, each one knowing this will not be a long defense. Their minds are already counting the paths of retreat. The rendezvous points further back. In the shadow of the church, the anti-tank rifle team braces their weapon on a windowsill. The long barrel protrudes through a broken pane, aimed at the nearest German vehicle. The gunner takes a slow breath, lines up the shot at a vision slit, and squeezes the trigger. The weapon kicks like a mule. The shot clangs off the frontal armor of a half-track, cracking the glass of the driver's slit and forcing the vehicle to jerk sideways. It is not a kill, but it is a reminder that nothing on this battlefield moves without risk. German machine guns respond with a scything spray of bullets, chewing through wooden shutters and plaster saints. The church bells give a dull, strangled jangle as rounds ricochet off them. Oberleutnant Fischer advances with a group of grenadiers along the village's edge, keeping to the cover of low stone fences and haystacks. The air smells of burning straw, cordite, and something heavier that clings to the back of the throat. Keep the tanks at a distance. He calls over the rattle of fire. They flush them out. You clear them. Do not bunch up in the streets. He gestures toward a ruined stable. 2 squads. Through there, out into the gardens. We flank their positions by the church. The grenadiers go, spreading out, using doorways and holes knocked in walls where villagers once carried firewood and tools. Now they carry rifles and grenades. Inside the village, Soviet defenders fight in bursts. A few shots from one window, then silence as they slip back through alleys and across yards to new firing points. A machine gun opens up from an attic, raking the street below, then goes quiet before artillery can zero in. A Molotov cocktail arcs from behind a shed and breaks against the side of a German vehicle. flames licking hungrily before the crew douses it and moves on. Sokolov watches the pattern form in the chaos. The Germans are forced to deploy fully, to bring up artillery and support weapons, to clear every house as if it might be the last line before the city itself. Time stretches. Minutes drag. Every delay is a victory. He glances at Nechayev. Signal to the rear, he asks. Nechayev nods. A runner takes off through the back gardens, carrying a simple message: Germans engaged, advancing cautiously, timetable disrupted. Behind them, closer to Stalingrad. Other officers will read it and adjust their own desperate calculations. Reinforcements pulled from one sector to another. Engineers given a little more time to dig trenches along factory walls. Guns shifted to cover likely approach routes. The village buckles under the weight of the assault. A house collapses after a direct hit, its roof sliding into the street in a cloud of smoke and sparks. A Soviet machine gun position falls silent, its team slumped over the weapon. A German squad dashes through, faces taut. One man pausing just long enough to kick the gun aside before moving on. In the shattered shadow of a barn, Nechayev checks his watch. "We have done enough here," he says, voice low but firm. "Prepare to fall back. Groups of 5. Take only what you can carry." Sokolov relays the order. The defenders begin to disengage with care, slipping out through the rear of buildings, moving in short dashes, keeping low. Some carry wounded between them, arms slung over shoulders, boots dragging through the dirt. Covering groups remain behind for a few precious moments more, firing at the Germans to mask the retreat. Then they too begin to slip away, one by one, leaving behind an illusion of resistance that lingers in smoke and echo. By the time Fischer's men secure the center of the village, Sokolov's detachment is already trudging toward the next line of low hills, the setting sun at their backs. They are fewer now, uniforms stained, faces hollowed by exhaustion, but their purpose has not changed. Behind them, the village burns, its thin wooden houses throwing up columns of black smoke that smear across the sky in the direction of Stalingrad, like a dark marker pointing the way. The Germans have taken another step forward. The Soviets have stolen another hour. By late evening, the sky over the steppe is streaked with smoke and the deep orange smear of the sinking sun. The heat of the day begins to fade, but the air still feels thick, heavy with dust and the lingering tang of propellant. Oberleutnant Fischer sits on the running board of a truck at the edge of the captured village, helmet off, wiping grime from his face with a damp cloth. Around him, the sounds of occupation grind on engines ticking as they cool. Shouted orders, clanking tracks as damaged vehicles are pulled aside for repair. Somewhere a field kitchen begins to ladle out thin stew, the smell drifting between burned houses. A dispatch rider dismounts nearby and strides toward the cluster of officers poring over a map on the hood of a staff car. The rider salutes, then hands over a folded message in a clear plastic envelope. Fischer cannot hear the exact words that pass between the officers, but he sees the small tightening of jaws, the way one finger taps impatiently at the paper. The rumor rolls down the line quickly enough anyway. The 6th Army is behind schedule, resistance stronger than expected, Stalingrad not yet visible, but already reaching out to drag at their boots. Later, Fischer is called over to the car. A major traces a line on the map with the edge of a pencil. "The Soviets are fighting forward of the city," he says. Tone clipped, ridge positions, villages, river crossings. You saw it yourself. Every time we advance, they appear, fire, and fall back. Command believes they are trying to buy time for stronger forces closer to Stalingrad. He taps another point on the map, nearer to the symbol that marks the great bend of the Volga. "Tomorrow, you will push toward this line. Reconnaissance suggests new defensive positions here. Expect more of what you saw today. Screen the advance. Report delays. Keep moving whenever possible. The city is our objective, not these scraps of ground." Fischer nods. But in his mind, the scraps of ground have faces now. The men who fired from the ridge, the fleeting silhouettes in village windows, the shadows slipping away through the smoke. Far ahead of him, already moving again under the darkening sky, Sokolov and the remnants of Nechaev's detachment trudge along a dirt track that leads toward the glow on the horizon. It is not sunset anymore. It is Stalingrad, or what lies between them and it, burning. The men walk in a loose file, boots scuffing the dusty road. Every so often a truck roars past, heading east, loaded with civilians or supplies, eyes staring from beneath bundles and blankets. Once, an anti-aircraft gun mounted on a lorry rattles by. Crew hunched against the wind, scanning the sky for German planes even in the fading light. At a crossroads marked by a leaning signpost, they are halted by a military policeman wearing the dark blue cap of the NKVD. Behind him, a few more soldiers in similar caps watch with hard, unreadable expressions. "Units of what formation?" the policeman asks crisply. 62nd Army, forward detachment. Nechaev answers, "We have been delaying along the western approaches. We were ordered to fall back to the next prepared line." The policeman studies the battered group, taking in the torn uniforms, the smoky faces. For a moment, it seems he might question them further. Then he steps aside and points toward the distant glow. "You will find new positions assigned at the assembly area ahead," he says. "The city is organizing its defense. You will not be retreating much farther." Sokolov feels the weight in those words, not just a statement, but a warning. The road may stretch on, but the space to yield is shrinking. They march through the night, passing more signs of a city under threat. Columns of workers heading outward to dig trenches and lay mines. Trucks loaded with barbed wire, ammunition crates, and oil drums being rushed to makeshift strong points. Somewhere to the south, the dull rumble of distant bombing carries over the horizon as the Luftwaffe tests the skies above the Volga. By dawn, Sokolov stands on a low rise and finally sees it. Stalingrad. It does not look like the heroic city of posters. From this distance, it is a low, sprawling smudge along the river. Chimneys and cranes and factory roofs jutting against the pale morning sky. The Volga itself glints beyond, a broad ribbon of silver cut by smoke columns. Between him and the city lie more ridges, more villages, more dry gullies. Ground that will be fought over again and again. He knows now that the clashes of the previous day were only the outer ripples of a much larger storm. Behind him, the men of his detachment sink down along the slope, dropping their packs with tired groans. Some close their eyes for a few stolen minutes of sleep. Others simply stare east, toward the city that is already shaping their fate. You can feel it too. If you picture that morning the sense that the road west of Stalingrad is narrowing, funneling both attacker and defender into a struggle that will not be decided by a single ridge or village, but by a grinding, relentless contest of will. The first German units have met the first organized Soviet resistance. The campaign has truly begun. That same morning, as the first full light spreads across the steppe, the German forward positions stir once more. Oberleutnant Fischer stands beside his half-track at the new start line east of the burned village. The vehicles are arranged in a loose formation, tanks spaced wide, infantry already mounted or waiting beside the track. The men look tired, faces smudged and hollow-eyed, but their movements are methodical. Routine helps keep thoughts from wandering too far ahead. An operations officer rides up in a staff car, steps out, and unrolls a map on the hood. Several platoon leaders gather around, Fischer among them. The officer traces a gloved finger along the penciled arrows. "The pattern is clear," he says. "Soviet forces are organized in layers west of Stalingrad, forward screens, then stronger positions closer to the city. They rarely stand and die in place. They aim to slow us, then fall back." He taps a series of small circles marked along ridges and streams. You will expect resistance at these points. Outposts, strong points, possibly elements of larger formations. Your job is to force them to reveal themselves. Fix them, then push them out of the way. We cannot afford to bog down. The city must be reached quickly before they can fully organize its defense. There is a brief silence. The officers know what this means in practical terms. More sharp, local clashes. More houses turned to rubble. More fields cratered. More bodies left behind in shallow graves and burned-out hulls. As they disperse, Fischer walks back to his men. A young grenadier finishes tightening the strap on his helmet and glances up. "Herr Oberleutnant," he asks quietly, "do you think they will keep running once we reach the city?" Fischer looks east, where the haze of distance blends land and sky. "I think," he answers after a moment, "that there is nowhere left for them to run after the city." He climbs into the half-track, raises his hand, and the engines roar to life. The column begins to move again, crawling across the open ground like a steel serpent seeking the next blow, closer to Stalingrad. Sokolov and his detachment reach an assembly area on the outskirts of a factory district. The city is louder here. Hammers clang against metal. Trucks grind through intersections, horns blaring. Men in work clothes and women in headscarves haul bricks and timbers, building barricades across streets. Others carry sandbags into factory courtyards where machine gun nests are being prepared among stacks of raw steel and coal. An officer from the army staff, his uniform somewhat less dusty than theirs, meets Nechayev and Sokolov near a warehouse that has been converted into a command post. Inside, maps of the city and surrounding approaches cover the walls, marked with colored grease pencil. "You held them up yesterday?" the staff officer asks. "Yes," Nechayev replies simply. "We destroyed some vehicles, forced them to deploy twice, then we broke contact." The officer makes a note, then points to a sector on the map that hugs the western edge of the city, where factory blocks give way to open terrain. "Your men will join a composite regiment here," he says. "You know how they fight out there on the steppe. That experience will be needed. We are forming a belt of positions in depth, street by street if needed." As they leave the warehouse, Sokolov looks up at the cranes and chimneys that loom over the district. It is hard to imagine these structures as battlefield positions, yet already he can see soldiers chalking range numbers on walls. Engineers measuring distances for minefields between rail lines. The line they will defend is no longer a ridge or a village. It is a city of stone and steel. Later that day, he finds a quiet moment on a factory roof. From there, he can see the road that runs back west. A faint dust cloud marks the distant movement of columns, still too far to pick out details. German units pushing forward, closing the gap hour by hour. He rests his hands on the warm brick and thinks of the ridge, the village, the long march in the dark. Each brief stand, each hurried retreat has led here. The enemy has been forced to bleed time for every step. Whether it will be enough, no one can yet say. Out on the steppe, Fischer rides with the lead elements of his company, scanning the land ahead. Every rise now looks like a possible ambush. Every copse of trees, every cluster of farm buildings, seems to hide invisible eyes. He knows that beyond those folds of ground lies the city whose name his orders repeat again and again. Stalingrad. He shifts his grip on the rail of the half-track and feels sweat on his palm despite the breeze. Whatever they encounter along this road, he understands one thing clearly. The Soviets are not broken. They are trading distance for preparation, maneuver for stubbornness. Both men, German and Soviet, are caught inside the same converging story. For Fischer, it is a march into an unknown city that must be taken. For Sokolov, it is a retreat that is no longer a retreat. but a final stand that grows nearer with every kilometer lost. July 17th, 1942, on the western approaches to Stalingrad. The first serious clash between the advance elements of the German 6th Army and the defending Soviet forces is already fading into the noise of a larger campaign. Yet on that day, in those first sharp skirmishes, you can see the outline of what is to come: cautious advances, desperate delaying actions, ground yielded slowly and at great cost. The guns that spoke on that dusty ridge and in that burning village were the first notes of a battle that will soon engulf an entire city and mark history with a single name.